Hey there, welcome to today's video where I'm going to show you how to cook mushrooms the right way. So recently I saw something which really caught my eye. I saw somebody explaining a new way to cook mushrooms that I hadn't really come across before. And to be honest, I was pretty skeptical about it at first. What he was suggesting is that you got to boil them in water before you then maybe finish them off by throwing them in a little bit of oil. And to me that sounded kind of crazy. I had always thought of boiling mushrooms that it just makes them kind of watery, slimy and rubbery. And to this day, my mum is still confused about the fact that I grow mushrooms for a living because when I was a child, I absolutely hated mushrooms. And it wasn't until I was about 17 or 18 where I saw someone cook them in the proper, what I thought was the proper way previously, where you basically cook them in the pan in smaller batches, not loading them all in at the same time. That's how you end up with slimy mushrooms. And so I saw somebody cook them in smaller batches and really brown them off and get them to this lovely caramelized sort of brown texture and flavored. And that really sort of turned me on to mushrooms for the first time to eat them. I really enjoyed eating them like that. And that's how I've been cooking them for the last 20 years or so. And that was why I was so intrigued by this. So the guy that I'm talking about here that's proposing this new way to cook mushrooms is a guy called Jim Fuller. He is a Texan chef now based in Australia, and he runs a company producing kind of meat alternatives out of mushrooms. So his company is called Fable Food Company. I'll put a link below this video, you can check it out. What I'm going to do today though is I'm going to cook them up in the method that he describes, and I'm also going to cook them alongside the way that I normally cook mushrooms, and I'm going to eat the two of them alongside each other and just show you what they look like, show how they compare and how they taste. So I'm going to go and jump over there. I'm at home now. I'm going to go and jump behind the stove, start cooking the mushrooms and show you how it's done, and then we'll come back afterwards when they're finished and I'll give you my verdict. All right, let's go. So the process begins just by putting the pan on really hot heat, and then to that I'm just adding a cup of water. You don't need loads of water, it's just enough to poach the mushrooms in. And then I'm just going to begin to add the mushrooms to the pan in the way that you normally would. And then once you've got all the mushrooms in the pan, you just want to give them a good stir around, make sure they're all covered up with water. And we're going to let them just poach in this liquid now for around about 10 minutes, just stirring them every now and then, and as the water begins to boil off. So at this point the mushrooms have been cooking for about 2 minutes, and you can already see that the water's starting to turn this lovely mushroomy brown colour. That's kind of like a mushroom stock now that they're cooking in, and that will begin to bubble up over the next few minutes as it slowly reduces down. Now at this point the mushrooms have been cooking for around about 10 minutes and the water's almost entirely boiled off, and I can tell the texture of the mushrooms, they look like they're pretty much cooked, so I'm just going to give them a quick taste. The texture is very succulent, they're clearly cooked, and I know that it's time to just finish boiling off that last bit of water, and then they'll be ready for the oil. Meanwhile, I'm going to get the second pan on the go here for the other batch of mushrooms that I'm going to cook in the normal way, which is just sort of fried up in olive oil. And now that the first batch of mushrooms have completely boiled off their water and they're starting to brown up a bit with the mushroom stock, it's time to add the oil. Now we're getting towards the end here with the first batch of mushrooms, so it's time to add a bit of salt, pepper and some fresh parsley. Now the second batch of mushrooms that are frying in the olive oil, if you look close up you can see that there is a lot of water trying to escape from the mushrooms and is mixing with the olive oil in the pan, and that's, to some degree, it's kind of slowing down the rate at which the mushrooms can cook and brown up. And that's one of the reasons why Jim Fuller suggests that you poach them in liquid first, because if you just cook them in some kind of fat, whether it's butter or oil, there's a bit of a battle going on here with the water trying to escape the mushrooms at the same time that the fat is on the outside of the mushroom trying to sort of seal it up. So batch 1 is now finished. I've turned the heat off just to let them sit there for a minute. Batch 2 is browning up nicely now, so I'm going to go ahead and add a bit of salt, pepper and parsley to them as well. Alright, so both batches are done. I'm going to load them on some toast and go and eat them. Alright, so what's the verdict? Well, first up, I would just say you can cook mushrooms in either of these two ways and they're both absolutely delicious. There is a difference though, and the difference is in the texture inside the mushroom. So the ones that have been poached inside their own liquid in the way that Jim has suggested mushrooms should be cooked, they're much softer, more succulent inside the mushroom. The texture is much more delicate. Whereas the ones that have been fried in oil are crispy on the outside just like the other ones are, but on the inside they're a little bit more firm in texture, a little bit more on the chewy end of the spectrum. So the difference really is that those that are poached in their own liquid are a bit more delicate, but also crisped up on the outside. So you get this kind of different texture basically by cooking them like that. I like both methods, but I actually really like this new method of poaching them in liquid. I'm going to play with that and maybe experiment a little bit with different types of liquid that you might cook them in. So maybe not just water, but maybe in stock or maybe in beer or wine. I'm going to try playing around with that a little bit because I really like the overall texture that you get at the end. And the way that Jim explains the difference there is that when you fry mushrooms in oil right from the start, there's a bit of a battle going on. You've got the fat on the outside of the mushroom that's trying to sort of seal the outside of the mushroom at the same time as all the water inside the mushroom is trying to rush out. And there's a bit of a battle going on there. It lowers the cooking point of the oil, and you don't get maybe all the water kind of shifting out of the mushroom in the same way, and you end up with this sort of firmer texture. Whereas the ones that are poached in their own liquid, they have chance to cook right the way through to the middle, makes it a lot softer and more delicate on the inside, and they also sort of cook in their own stock, and then of course you finish it off with a bit of fat at the end, so you still end up with that kind of crispy outside. So there you go, there's a new way of cooking mushrooms. Go ahead and give it a try, see what you think, and let us know in the comments below. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks a lot for joining us. Do subscribe to the channel and we'll see you in the next video.